Hi, I'm Tammy Potter, and welcome to the Pregnancy Process Podcast, a show designed to help you navigate the hugely transformative journey to motherhood, where you'll hear the unique experience of experts in this area and the incredible stories of women sharing their conception, pregnancy, and postnatal journeys so that you can have a healthier, more informed pregnancy. In today's episode, clinical psychologist Dr. Ileana Hatton returns for a conversation that could transform the way you approach pregnancy, birth, and early motherhood in the digital age. With over 15 years experience and dual PhDs in clinical psychology and philosophy, Dr. Hatton has supported women and families across Australia and around the world, including 3 missions with Doctors Without Borders. In addition to her clinical practice, Ileana helps women build resilience and heal from trauma through specialized workshops. Drawing on this wealth of experience, we turn to a pressing question. What happens when the most vulnerable moments in a woman's life are shaped not by real-world support, but by the curated illusions and hidden algorithms of social media? Together, we explore how the illusion of expertise, influencer culture, and algorithm influence can quietly shape your beliefs, fuel anxiety, and impact your decisions during conception, pregnancy, and the early postpartum period. If you've ever wondered whether the advice you see online is truly serving you or quietly undermining your confidence, this episode will help you spot red flags, reclaim your agency, and build a healthier relationship with the digital world as you navigate this profound life transition. Ileana, thank you so much for your time today. It's fantastic to have you here with us.
It's so lovely to be back.
I know, I'm so excited for this conversation. You are always so incredible and filled with so many amazing insights. So I'm really excited for this particular topic. And let's dive straight in. We want to talk about social media and its impact on women in such a vulnerable stage, because during pregnancy, birth, that early postnatal period, women are so open. They're so open and impressionable, and people can say just small things and it can have such a huge impact on their trajectory and how they deal with pregnancy. And I think social media's got a big part to play in that. So I think, if it's okay with you, I'd like to start talking about the psychological mechanisms that make women in these life stages susceptible to things like trusting unqualified influencers. And a really good example of this is Belle Gibson in Apple Cider Vinegar. She completely fabricated cancer. And then from like a parenting content side of things, you've got Ruby Franke's like abusive parenting content. So what makes women so susceptible to trusting influencers that are so unqualified like this?
Yeah, and I bet you've also come across being a trainer and all the qualifications, and then looking at social media, I bet you also come across particular content that kind of really throws into question, makes you think about the difference between somebody who's maybe done a lot of professional training or certification in a certain area versus just some life hacks or personal experience that can lend to it. And yeah, I remember when we first started talking about this, the piece that came up that I was interested in was Belle Gibson, because that also obviously was such a significant or powerful story that then it got made into the series as well. And my first response was actually not that the material that she was offering was necessarily not valid in some way, but it's like, what is the platform? I feel like this is the bigger picture of when we step back and see the perspective of what is the platform that is offering the information, and how do you separate out the different information? And I think we both will have, as we go through like particular examples And maybe people that are listening have certain examples that come to their mind of the kind of material that we're talking about. But to your question, yeah, what makes women going through their pregnancy or postnatal process more vulnerable is it's just so transformational. I like to say to clients, because I heard it from a midwife friend, it's not just the birth of a baby, but it's the birth of a mother. It's like you are moving into such a different state in the world, right? A different person in a way, different role. So I feel like that's a big component of it. And it's the platform where the information is coming from. I think that's what I hope we can tease out a little bit, right?
Are there any particular psychological mechanisms that can make them? Because, yeah, absolutely. And in agreement, yes. As a pregnancy and postnatal specialist, I come across this every time I open up social media. As someone that's worked hands on with women in this phase of their lives for coming on close to 15 years now. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun. But I see it all the time. Pregnancy programs or postnatal programs. That's a lot of the time biased towards their own personal experience. And I think the danger with that, especially in my area, is that as a coach, you're typically highly trained, and we are different from the general population. Unless you're training athletes, a lot of times women who are coaches that go through the pregnancy process, their bodies are different because of the amount of training that they've had in the past versus a general population person that may have fallen pregnant and gone, oh my God, I need to train. So that's where the vulnerability in my area comes from, because you've got women who aren't well trained looking to women who are well trained and looking to their experience, then trying to take that and apply it to themselves without the understanding that they're completely different. And I think that's one thing that I really try and talk about, and I guess, yeah, open up the conversation around as much as possible when it comes to training during pregnancy, is what works with one person will not work for another. And you
Yeah.
have to take into consideration the training age, the injury history, the exercise history, all kinds of things. Everybody's body is different. And I think that's the one thing. And I know you get me started on this, I'm going off on a tangent. But in terms of the psychological mechanisms, is there anything in our psychology that makes them more susceptible? Like, I
Yes.
know that women's brains change massively during pregnancy. I know that we're very open and vulnerable in this time because of the amount of change going on in their lives. Is there any, obviously that's more your realm than mine. Mine's more the physical, but yours is more the mental, emotional, psychological. Are there any other mechanisms going on during the pregnancy period that make people more susceptible to this type of thing?
First, I think we want to take a step back and even look at what is this platform of knowledge, right?
Mm,
Because the thing is, social media is not just a place where you used to post a picture of yourself at the beach and your friends would like it and people would see what's going on in your life. And it used to be this kind of chronological, just following the next thing that was happening. Now, because we have the algorithms that have been put into place on social media, and this is not just Instagram, but TikTok has come in, Facebook, Meta changed the way in which it's working. So now it's not a place to just look at your friends and people and see what's going on in their life. It's actually become the place where we start to turn for knowledge, which is where it starts to get really more a bit messier, right? But if we take a step back and understand what is the platform, this is social media platforms and algorithms are these complex systems that are designed by teams of computer experts and software engineers, and then together with product managers. Like, this is business. And the main goal of the platform is not to provide and disseminate knowledge. It isn't the new Encyclopedia Britannica. It's a way to sell. Like, that is at the base what is supposed to be happening here. That's the goal. The reason why the algorithm was developed was because it engaged people. It was finding really smart scientific ways to engage people and hijack the dopamine system of our brain, the reward system, to get people to stay longer for the opportunity of selling to them. So the way that they do that is by the content that will be liked and more often shared, and therefore become higher on the algorithm and more likely to be received, is more extreme kind of content, things that catch your attention. So in order to do that, people have then evolved with that. What gets me the most hits? What gets me the most likes? What brings more of a following, if that's what the goal of the people using it is for? But in the end, the whole platform is actually made to sell to you. That's how they make money. That's how they keep going. So understanding that, first of all, is really important, that when we go on this, and this is where the biases come in, like the Gell-Mann effect, the amnesia effect that you brought up, we talked about a little bit before, that is this effect of, if we look at a piece of information, let's say even in the newspaper, about something that we have a high understanding of, like for you in training the body or anatomy or muscle in the health section maybe, and you read that and you realize that there are errors, or there are things that they're not correctly representing, or they're missing a part of the story, you will look at that and not necessarily take too much credence in it. But you can turn the page then to the business section, and if that's not somewhere that you know something about, you automatically trust what is there. It's like you almost forget that this kind of inaccuracy can exist in all the areas of that particular source of information, right? So social media capitalizes on that. And for example, another bias is like confirmation bias. So we want to see in the world, and we interpret the world in ways that fit with our worldview. If I take a very controversial kind of topic that kind of comes to mind, like vaccination, if you are somebody who has a particular view on vaccination, pro or anti, or then you will be often more drawn to and go towards, or even interpret information that fits with your worldview, because we want to feel like we've got it right. Yeah. And the algorithm works with that to give us information that we spend more time on. So really, it's almost creating like this echo effect, where the more we engage with it and the more we like things, the more we are likely to get more content that is not exactly the same but similar enough that they can then get us to stay longer on the platform. So then we're almost being drawn into this slightly tunnel visioned perception of the world, where you only know what you know and you don't pay attention to anything, and you get fed more of what you know. So this can be problematic, especially around conceiving, pregnancy and postnatally, that you're only necessarily going to be getting exposure to the information that maybe already fits with what your bias is, and be shut off from information that maybe challenges that a little bit or gives a different point of view. And definitely that nuance that you described, like that life is not this manicured, perfect, this rigid diet plan, or what, it's not that easy. Life is much more complex, but the platform makes it seem as though that's just the way it is, and it's really simple, or it should be simple. And also the amount of really, when I think of the amnesic effect, the Gelman amnesia effect, that you are more likely to just believe, especially when that's being repeated. Like in the beginning, you might have a gut sense, oh, I don't know if just doing this particular, let's say, Qigong exercise is going to treat my anxiety. But if you get that repeated material over and over, there's almost like we start to accept that is the way it is, and we lose the nuance.
And it just perpetuates that and it shuts you off to other options, other avenues, other thought processes. Unless, of course, you've got a curious mind and you want to learn more about different ways of doing things and how people do things differently.
Yes, and this is already in effect in a way. Before we had this, we were just living in our family units, right? Where we would only, I'm thinking a little bit more further back or a bit more traditional societies where the whole family is living together. Yes, you're going to be cocooned in this particular way of looking at the world and so on. But there's a critical other element, which I think speaks to your last point. Why are we more vulnerable now? Or why is the women going through their pre-postnatal journey more vulnerable? Is that we're far more isolated. We're not in the family unit in the same way anymore. We're not having the real life experience of watching aunties give birth or our cousins give birth and seeing that process play out. So women are often going into the whole process with absolutely zero understanding of what's in store, what does it look like, what things come up, what's tricky. And then social media can become the place where they're getting that information, but it's in a very specific way that we're receiving, and from people in these kind of highlight reels that just doesn't represent life at all.
I think the other thing to think about when it comes to that as well is a lot of these people that you do see, influencers, and I put my hand up, I fall into this same category. I am on social media and I have a product to sell. So
Yeah.
a lot of influencers are trying to sell you products. Now, I try not to do this too much, but a really key way of selling things to people is by using their pain points, right? Because most people, they're driven by two different things. They either want to move away from pain or towards pleasure. Most people moving away from pain is going to be the key driver for them. There's only a small portion of the population that will move towards pleasure and change the way that they do things or buy things or interact with someone, purchase their products, that type of thing. There's only a small amount of people that will move towards pleasure, whereas most people want to move away from pain. So then you've got marketers that are trying to hit those pain points. They're trying to dial down, especially when it comes to pregnancy, birth, and early motherhood. They're trying to dial down on women's fears. They're trying to heighten their fears, and they're already scared enough as it is because what you're saying, they're alone. They don't know what's coming, and there's so much uncertainty. They don't know how the birth's going to be. They don't know what late stage pregnancy is going to be. They don't know what life as a new mum is going to be like. And when there's uncertainty, and you can talk to this if you'd like, but when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear. And that makes women really vulnerable to marketing, I think, as well.
Yes. And you've brought up such a good point that there are also really helpful things on the platform. Like you, I imagine, are wanting to sell because you know that it will make people's lives significantly better. And
Mm.
of course, that is part of getting your message out and for people to know what is possible. It then becomes so difficult to untangle what is the information that's really beneficial for me versus what is a little bit more of maybe that quick fix or a quick hack, or if you just buy this product, everything will be better. And that can be so tempting when we are wanting control,
Mm.
is to, if I just do this thing, if I just buy this thing, everything will be better. And that's where it really requires us, which is what I think we're both really wanting, is like, how do we use it mindfully? It's a great tool and there's great information. It's this time of the world where we've never had so much information at our fingertips, and we can remember what is the base of where this information is coming from, and how do we use it in a way, again, that's really effective rather than it's exploitative, which I feel like, or fear mongering and creating more anxiety and stress for us. So it's just the same question, but to this new kind of tool or thing that's evolving in front of our eyes. And how can we bring really mindful awareness and be effective with this tool so that it supports us rather than take something away? Yeah.
So how can women do that? How can women go about auditing their kind of personal algorithm to break those cycles of fear driven? And we haven't even talked about the perfection obsessed, because when it comes to social media shaping women's perceptions of pregnancy, birth, early motherhood, there's not a lot of realness out there. You've got these perfect pregnant women with these beautiful bodies and glowing and beautiful baby bumps. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly many pregnant women out there that look like that and they love being pregnant and they look fantastic. But there's such a huge portion of women that hate being pregnant. But
Yeah.
then because we're so bombarded by these images of perfect pregnant women glowing in their pregnancy perfection, that when women actually feel like they're not enjoying pregnancy, they think that there's something wrong with them, that they're broken. And that really does mess with their brain. Like they're kind of like, why aren't I enjoying this? I should be enjoying this. But sorry, I'm getting like fired up here. But the reality is that pregnancy is really hard. It's the most metabolically challenging thing a woman can do. You feel nauseous for 12 weeks straight, possibly. The fatigue is unbelievable. Many women have back pain, pelvic pain, upper back pain, neck pain. They can't sleep. They go to the bathroom all the time.
You're going to lose all your crowd, Tammy. You're going to put everyone off pregnancy.
Sorry, but it's true. But then when you see the pictures in magazines and on social media, you don't see all of that. You just see this perfect glowing pregnant woman with her gorgeous bump. And then don't get me started on early motherhood, that first stage, fourth trimester. You've been there, you know what it's like. But then on social media, you've got this perfectionistic, perfectly curated, I don't know, feed of these perfect experiences. And it's like they catch the glimmers only of that period rather than all the other stuff that goes along with it. And I think while capturing glimmers, we should all be working towards those glimmer moments. They're not real, they're not real life. So, how can women audit their algorithms to break that kind of fear driven, perfectionistic, obsessed content consumption that does shape their perceptions of pregnancy and birth and early motherhood?
Yeah, it's a really good question. First, I think it's really important to understand how addictive it is, right? We think of addictions like substances, but the dopamine hit that people posting get with the likes and anticipation of likes, and then comments, and also the dopamine hit of even just a ping or the notification is like they've learned how to hack our reward system. Yeah. So I think the big picture is first making sure that we are not spending inordinate amounts of time. So auditing in the sense of making sure that there is real life connection, making sure we have time off phones, limiting the amount of time, especially at night. And then it is possible to make sure that we're consuming what we're watching mindfully. Like, I think this is the piece of bringing ourselves back into the process. So when we're watching, I think even noticing, like taking a break from it for a while, and even checking in with what's happening inside the body when we are watching particular things. And if something is triggering and it does bring up fear, because that's one way that, as you said, you can sell when somebody is in pain and wanting a solution. So fear mongering and getting people freaked out about, if you don't do this, then that. Checking in with the body, if you have a good radar for your own gut sense when you listen to certain material, and then actively choosing to click the button which is watch less of this content. That's an option there. So we then do have the power to unlike and unfollow, and maybe only choose people that have professional background. So you can do a search on the people that you're watching, see what their credentials are. Obviously, if people look you up, they'll see that you've done certification. I follow a fantastic woman on Instagram who is a really amazing naturopath and women's doctor, and she does sell. She sells also products as well, and I watch certain things just for the knowledge that she provides, or just listening, just getting certain information from her that I'm looking for, because I know she's a reputable source. Doing a little bit of research, if you are following somebody, on how did they get to where they are, what kind of background they have. Is this someone who is just wanting to make content because they want to make money on the platform, and they don't have any background? Or are you really impressed by where they've come from, or a reason why you want to listen to them? But yeah, we can shape it. It's listening to us. So we have a lot of power in making it work for us. We don't have to be at the will of the platform. We can actually choose how we want to use it in a way that is for us. Again, taking back a little bit of that power. I think that's the best way.
It's interesting that you mentioned the neuroscience of it, because they really have hacked our brains and our reward systems. And like, it's addictive.
Yep.
It really is. The more time you spend on it, the more that you'll go to reach your phone. And sometimes I'll pick up my phone and just from habit, I'll open a social media app first when I'm like, oh my, and then I find myself like doing something. I'm like, this isn't even why I picked up my phone.
Yeah, I know.
But let's talk about dopamine, because they have hacked our reward system, and it is a dopamine-driven design. So can we talk about what ways does the dopamine-driven design of social media distort our decision making and our emotional regulation, especially for women in that kind of planning, trying to conceive, conception, pregnant, postpartum time?
Yeah, okay, this is the main one that I think comes up for me, is that it actually prevents emotional processing. I don't know if you notice it for yourself, but I hear a lot from my clients, and I think I notice it in myself as well, because I also use it much more than I expected to use it. And only since the algorithm came in, right? When Instagram was just a place to look at pictures, I had nothing really up. I occasionally looked at friends, but it was when it became curated, it was feeding you information, that suddenly I noticed the time went up. And what I think is the biggest one is that when we are going into scrolling, it often is an avoidance of what is going on for us emotionally, right? Like, a lot of addictions are a solution to another problem. And dopamine is about reward and pleasure and social. We get that a lot from social interaction. So this is like a fake form of interaction. It is a parasocial relationship is the term, is when one person is giving attention, effort, and so on into the relationship, but the other person is completely oblivious or not aware even the other person exists. This is what we do with celebrities, is that we can pay inordinate attention, and it feels like, and the authenticity that a lot of influencers use and the relatability makes us feel like we know them and we're in their life, and they have no awareness of you. Like, they have awareness that they have followers, but this is a one-sided relationship, which feels like it's rewarding because we want interaction with others, but it is not a fulfilling one because there is actually no relationship there. And at the same time, we are avoiding often the relationships that actually exist in front of us, like our partner, our children, whatever, because it is so drawing. The material is made, just enough of this like novelty to want, so we never get tired of it. If it was just the same material, that was why people would switch out before, then you would get a extinction effect where it doesn't provide you any more reward. But they've very cleverly made it so that the material is just different enough that there's a level of novelty that we can engage endlessly. And our brain is getting so used to these hits. So in terms of where I feel like within the group that you speak to, for the women that are going through that process, it's taking it out of the body. When we pay attention to the screen, we are losing connection with our own body. So it's preventing emotional processing of what is going on inside of us. If we're feeling fear, it can feel really good to not be with that and look at 100 videos. That means that the fear is not getting processed, and maybe the content that we're receiving is loading us with a whole lot of new emotions depending on what it is. So I watch a lot of Insta for comedy effect. So I'm actually seeing the other side of what you're describing. I'm seeing all the mums that make some hilarious content about their children doing terrible things and the house is a mess. And so I watch it for comedy effect often. I notice that's my go-to. And that can be really helpful for a little while until, if it keeps going. And I'm hearing, and I know that the other part exists where there is that really perfection oriented, here is my perfect life. I've seen them too. The house is 10-bedroom house. Every surface is spotless. They've got 3 children. They get up at 4 a.m. They go, this is my routine. I go to the sauna. Then I make my perfect chia smoothie and blah, blah, blah. And the problem with that is I think it loads so much expectation, possibility for comparison, shame, feelings of inadequacy and failure that you cannot do that. And those unrelenting standards, of this is what you should have, right? That actually is an illusion. But we don't know that in the moment, or our brain is not necessarily seeing the larger picture. So what that loads the woman going through her process with is, my partner is not like that, or I didn't get, baby reveal party that involved 2 different colored cars. So I'm so unworthy or failing, and that can be so soul destroying to self-esteem, and feeling like we have to try harder, or it's not even, we just give up and then keep not paying attention to the emotion. We can get really stuck in that place, I think.
It's really interesting that you bring up that numbing effect, that masking, that numbing effect of it's replacing something. And I feel like in a world where we are so disconnected, we're living alone more now than we ever did. We're living with less people than we ever did before. So it's almost like it's coming in and numbing those feelings of loneliness. But it's superficial. It's only doing that surface level. It's not actually creating any kind of connection
Yeah.
when we're also connection starved.
Yeah.
It's giving us this false sense of connection, but then when we actually go out into the world, we realize that those connections aren't real.
Yeah.
Mm. And it's the comparison as well, I think. It's, you know what they say, comparison's the thief of joy. You can scroll through your feed and exactly compare yourself to, like, where it depends on what you're looking for or where you feel inadequate, and or where you feel those sense of less or loss or never. And I think that's where, I guess, that whole kind of doing the work comes in and working on yourself, because you're not going to have those feelings and those comparisons if you're okay sitting in where you're at. But I think when women are facing so much change and transition and unknown, it'd be really easy to compare what other people's lives look like and think, that's what I want my life to look like. That's what I want my pregnancy to look like. That's what, you know.
And that's when we buy the product, because that's what makes us think. That's where the exploitation can come in, is that implicitly or explicitly influencers are exploiting that to sell product. And that, because when we feel inadequate, when we feel not good enough, when we feel like somebody else has it, then we can get really easily drawn into trying to solve the problem by, if I just get that, or I buy the face mask and I get the lip stain and I whatever, or I'm not thinking pregnancy, but I'm thinking of things that come to my mind, then it's so easy. And that's what the whole thing is meant for. They know how to get you there, right? But as long as, like you and I, having this conversation, and if we can always keep that larger frame in mind of, when I'm looking at this, I bring myself back occasionally to, this is here to sell. This is the main reason why this exists, to sell something to me. I can still enjoy it and do, but I need to keep in mind what is the whole point of what this is here for, right? Then I can enjoy it in a much more mindful way that, yeah, doesn't draw me into that kind of process so unconsciously. Yeah.
When it also, when it comes to selling, and this is gonna segue into another question that I wanna talk to you about, because it goes hand in hand. So when we talk about selling, there's that this is better than that kind of comparison. And I think when it comes to that kind of pregnancy, birth, postnatal period, you've got quite a big divide in that, where you've got the more kind of medical model and the more alternative therapies model. And it comes in to play throughout the whole thing. And I feel like obviously people are going to be drawn to different areas depending on their personality types. But I definitely think that social media has played into this a little bit more. You've got that kind of crunchy mum on one side, and then you've got the more evidence based on the other. And I think those two can go to extremes. And I think that can distort our decision making processes. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. That is the whole thing, right? To make content, which is what people are trying to do now,
It's
is,
divisive.
yeah, and that sensationalist, like you, and people are doing workshops on this now. How do you make content that's going to go viral? That's what people want, and they want the likes, they want the followers. Usually, like, people are using it more now for that, rather than just, I could be wrong, but I feel as though that has become the majority, rather than just going on to look at friends or see what people are doing. So then we need to understand, it's always going to be the dramatic. That's how they catch you. You have to, the first 3 seconds, if you understand how to make content, and I have looked into it because I'm like, maybe it is a good platform for me as well. This is where people are going. Do I want to get into that? And even understanding, yeah, you need to catch the attention within the first few seconds. How do you do that? You don't do it by doing something very nuance, like boring or, every day. You have to, it's dramatic, it's extreme, it's catching something controversial. So when we understand that is the formula, there isn't going to be the middle ground. That's not what is going to get shares and likes and comments and the traction. So actually, most of the stuff we're watching is going to be very like binary and divisive, or extreme version, or catchy phrase, or here's the life hack that's going to change your life. So that is what it is. And if we can see that's just the nature of the formula, and not get too drawn into believing, because we know, we live life, it's not like that. It's not, especially the complexity of pregnancy and parenting and birthing. These are extremely nuanced, usually, experiences. There is no black and white, really. Yeah. So keeping that perspective in mind is really useful, like to then looking at the content from a certain angle.
Then going further down this rabbit hole, you've got, and I'm just going to circle back to say my experience in the fitness industry and the health and well-being and pregnancy specific. You've certainly got really unqualified people that are monetizing their almost harmful narratives around pregnancy, birth, early motherhood. And there's got to be some failures. There's got to be failures that are allowing this. What risk do these failures pose for women that are genuinely seeking support in this area?
Can you think of some examples of when you've seen that?
So, a perfect example for us here is the influencer that I mentioned when we first started, Ruby Franke. And she was actually jailed for abusing her children, and her hardline online stance about how to parent and how to raise children. And she was actually abusing her own children. So I think that's a really perfect example of this, because you've got someone that's super unqualified
Yeah,
monetizing her harmful narrative to vulnerable parents that were at their wits' end with their children, basically.
yeah. This is what's so helpful to, and we can really apply it to pretty much everything you, right? Is that it looks so effortless and flawless and believable on camera, but that is not what's going on. We don't know. We never know what's going on behind the camera. And I think that's really helpful, like to keep in mind all the time, is that what you are presented is often nothing like what is actually going on at a deeper level in everyday life. And the reality of even living a life where you are constantly creating content, like how does that really impact on a relationship if you are filming everything that you are doing? Like you have to think about how that really looks in the real world. If you've got a camera all the time and trying to capture the perfect shot, we're talking about a highly controlled environment. Like this is in many regards. So I think it's always so good to question. The one haven't seen the Ruby Frank example, so I'm not great to comment on that. But something I am more across, that I feel more comfortable to comment on, is anything to do with diet and food. I think that can become a real minefield, because again, like you said before, everybody's body is so different. And so to take on advice from social media on, say, do this and it will increase your iron, fads around certain food to eat, not eat, like this can become very problematic. And especially like in my realm of mental health and in pregnancy and postnatal, like the diet, what we're eating and how we're eating and how often we're eating. And this is an area that can make a massive difference. And the way in which that could be captured within a social media post, very unlikely to really bring about the type of change that you're probably wanting to see. So I feel like this is where it's so helpful to step back and again see what is it there for, mainly selling, go back to usually if we want to make quite a significant change in our life or do something health-wise, we need to go to a certified professional source or a book or something that's a little bit more fleshed out than just this kind of little tidbit that we get, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's probably one of the reasons why I go for long format copy in pretty much most things that I do, especially like a lot of my videos are longer format videos. The podcast is longer. I'm trying to give the nuance around things because pregnancy is so nuanced, and I'm trying to give that information so people get the whole picture. But the algorithm doesn't work with that. So that's where you get people getting these tiny little snippets without the whole story and the whole picture to it.
Yes.
But you've mentioned kind of mental models a little bit here. Are there any critical thinking frameworks that we can use to assess the credibility of advice and stories that people encounter online?
There are. I did a bit of research on that. So I have to say it's not something that I naturally knew because this is such a new area. But yeah, the framework that I found that really helps is the who, what, why, how.
Hmm.
So, who is giving the advice? What is their qualification? What is being claimed? Is it a definitive statement or a recommendation based on evidence? Why is it being shared? This is the big one. I think understanding somebody's intention, there's definitely a difference between, for example, why you might want to provide people information or the naturopath that I was describing, wanting to disseminate maybe information so women have a bit more understanding of their periods, their fertility, versus just maybe wanting to develop followers or somebody that may not have any qualifications but wants to share their story. You want to really question the why. Is it to inform or entertain or persuade or sell something? And then how is it supported? So is there scientific evidence? Are there peer-reviewed studies? Or is it purely anecdotal? And so I think exploring that, for example, I like a lot of the Qigong exercises that I watch, but I wouldn't necessarily stop there, right? It might be, if I'm interested in that, I might want to go and try out Qigong classes and meet an actual teacher in person, and then couch what I'm seeing in the content in what I'm hearing from somebody, yeah, who's in front of me, who's trained and might be able to answer questions. And then there's what's called the triangulation method. So this is where not relying on a single source of information, so consulting multiple resources and discussing with your healthcare provider. And so it's making sure that you have a series of places that have differing information so you can cross check. And then the last one is the red flag checklist. So if it's too good to be true, red flag. If it's fear mongering, red flag. If there is dismissal of science or evidence, so if it actively discredits established scientific advice or consensus without presenting a lot of credible counter evidence, red flag. Is it secret knowledge? So does it claim to have exclusive insider information? Is it a personal anecdote as sole proof? Red flag. If there's heavy product promotion, red flag. Or if there's emotional manipulation. So does it play heavily on guilt or shame or idealized imagery to persuade, which is where I think that checking back in with your gut feeling, how does this content sit with me? What's the emotion that it brings up is the way to suss that out a little bit. So
Do you
I
know,
use
it's
the
funny because it's almost like you're going through all the things that we've spoken about,
yeah,
that kind of
those are
little
the
checklist.
flags.
Now, when it comes to the illusion of perfect pregnancy or perfect motherhood on social media, I you know, that does really exploit the emotional vulnerability of women in that stage. Are there any practices that, because you've mentioned checking in with yourself emotionally, do you have any other practices that women can do to rebuild that trust in themselves and I guess their filters during these life stages?
Yes. And these are skills, I would say, from a particular model of therapy. So I wouldn't be assuming that by just talking about them, somebody might be able to just do that automatically. So I want to preface that by saying this is not a hack that you should just go away and try to do, but there are videos you can listen to or books that will go into it in more detail. So do that other due diligence to learn the skill or go to a qualified therapist to practice that. But yeah, three things I can think of, mental practices. Yeah. Firstly, non-judgment, right? So easier said than done, but instead of seeing the world from that good or bad or right or wrong, which we can get into the binary, right? A little bit of this is absolutely right, this is not right. That's part of the bias that we start to get into when we're just receiving certain information. I only believe in vaccination, everybody who doesn't is stupid, that kind of binary, and the other way around, right? So instead, seeing if we can practice allowing in the other perspective or allowing in the part that we're not seeing and not getting to too much of judging. But if we can just practice describing a little bit and not falling into that's definitely all good or that's definitely all bad, I think that can just, again, help us to not drop into the illusion too much. We do not know what's going on or what it took to film that or where that came from, and not jumping to conclusions in that way, just seeing it for what it is, yeah, in a descriptive way as much as possible really helps. And the main reason is because judgments create emotion. That is the main, if something wants to motivate you, the more we get into that good, bad, right, wrong, yeah, we're creating a whole lot of emotions as a result of that. Another mental activity is something called wise mind. Have you heard of this practice? So this is from dialectical behavior therapy, which is especially used for emotional regulation. So how do we make decisions from that place inside of ourselves that knows what is right for us in this moment? The general idea is that we have some different states of mind. When we're in emotion mind, we're more likely to make impulsive decisions, make decisions that are depending on what we feel, like I want to eat the whole packet of Tim Tams, or I want to sit here and scroll, or I don't want to get out of bed, or I need to buy this right now. So that's one state of mind when our emotions are more up. And then logical mind is when we're in that more cold kind of just fact, not much emotion, not paying attention to needs, very just cognitive and intellectual. And wise mind is this beautiful place that when you meld your emotions and your logic together, there's something else that has the possibility to arise. So when you're looking at something, or if you're going to make a decision, or even if you're just sitting looking at the content of this reel or whatever, seeing if you can access the deeper part of you that tells you whether or not that really feels like it's important, or maybe the part of it's important, or the bit that resonates with you and leaving the rest. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if we have that place somewhere that we know how to access, we're much less likely to get drawn in and be affected as much by maybe what we're seeing, or be less impulsive maybe to buy the thing and the quick fix and jump into that, but more stay in this wise observer state of what, yeah, I'm watching this interesting thing, funny thing, whatever, but I'm not in it or being controlled by it as much. And then the last one is part of that, but training your attention. So really being able to switch out when you want, or having some more control over that, that this can be like glue for your attention, but the attention is your tool. So you can pay attention to the information there on the screen, but you can draw your attention to something else, and even noticing how you have control over that, again, unsticks us from the kind of addictive nature of it. So even looking away or taking breaks and getting up and going away from it, or paying attention on purpose to something else for a while, it's just, yeah, learning that we have control over that.
I use that one quite a lot when I'm trying to get into that deep focus work brain, especially on the days that I'm working from home. Obviously, when I'm with clients, I can't just pick up my phone and scroll, and I wouldn't want to anyway. But when I'm at home and I want to get into that real deep focus work zone, I actually put my phone in a different room or in a drawer away from me. So for me to actually access my phone, I have to get up and move to a different area, or it's in a spot where I might just briefly go and leave. Like it might be in the kitchen. So if I need to check something, I'm in the kitchen, I look at it, okay, cool, leave it there and go back to what I'm doing. And I know for me, all of my notifications are off. I don't get any notifications. I don't get banners. My phone lives on silent. It pretty much. It's rare that my phone is off silent. I don't get banners popping up on my phone as notifications. I see that and it gives me anxiety straight away. I get badges for notifications, but only on very specific apps. Like my social media, I don't get badges to notify me of anything, nothing. I don't get badges to say I've got a direct message. The only thing I get notification from is if I think I've got a text message, a phone call, and maybe some emails or something like that. Just your basic, but everything else, like maybe WhatsApp as well, but everything else, social media, boom, I don't know. Until I go into that app, I don't get any notifications from them. And I think that,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
hear how you got that information from noticing as well. Like you said, that gives me anxiety, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So then you're taking these steps to actively reduce the amount of stress or, yeah, pinging that's going to just set your system off. And for someone else, the notifications might not be the problem, but when they look at certain material, or when they stay on there, they notice that they feel other emotions like shame from sitting on there for so long, or tiredness, or so that awareness of, well, yeah, what's going to support me. And you also make me think and touch into this other really helpful component of that, which I think is the instant gratification
Mhm.
versus the slower self-care. Because we are getting shaped, because we're all behavioral, so we get shaped by our environment. We are getting shaped to want the instant fix, or the good feeling, or the switch out that the scrolling gives us. And I love how you said, I put in the other room, because actually that's exactly the thing. Sitting with, it's not just there. In order to go and have that, I have to take this effort and go and move to another space, which actually disrupts the addictive catch, right? It kind of disrupts that, because you're having to sitting with the urge of not having it for longer, or it's harder to get it. So you are learning how to let your system tolerate not having, that around. And I think that's going to be a really important thing for this generation now, sitting with that slower process of feeling good. Meditating or something else requires effort and energy, and it's a slower release of the dopamine, but it's a longer lasting effect on the body. Whereas this quick, instant, it's right there, right now, small over and over drops of dopamine is not sustainable over time. That's not, otherwise we're going to be glued to our phone or some other activity that requires us to have that.
I think your brain, it's like anything. If when you're so used to getting ahead of something, eventually you need more of it, which is where the addiction side of things comes in. So eventually you want more and you need to be on it longer. So it's the same thing. But I know that I've kept you for a little bit of time now. So I'm going to ask you the one thing that I ask everybody. And let's try and keep this based on this conversation. If there was one thing that you wish all women knew before having a baby, what would that be?
That this is such a sacred transformation of yourself. And I feel something that's been on my mind a lot recently and that comes up a lot, like I feel like it's coming up a lot for people, is that we have become so aware of the child in like our modern life more than we were before. We were so focused on the parent, now we're focused on the child. And I feel like this midway point of a family, focused family, where both the parents' needs and the child's needs are so important. So I feel like the transformation of the woman into the mother is so sacred. And if you can be present with, that's what I would wish.
It's very sound advice. Thank you so much for your time today. It's always such a pleasure. And
Thank you. You're so
yeah.
passionate about it. I love you bring so much to the table and you're so loving towards, your work. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful to watch.
And if you're hearing this message, I want to say a huge thank you because it means that you've listened to this entire episode. Of course, if you have any questions about the things that we covered in this episode or want to know more about me or my other projects, you can find me on YouTube and Instagram at The Pregnancy Process.